All right, today from María Fernanda Ampuero from her collection Cockfight. First story, we'll see, we'll get a few in. These are very short. First story is called Monsters. Narcissa used to say that we should be more afraid of the living than the dead, but we didn't believe her because in all the horror movies we saw, we were most afraid of the dead, the ones that had returned from beyond, the possessed. Mercedes was terrified of demons, and I was terrified of vampires. We talked about it all the time, about satanic possessions and about men with fangs who fed on the blood of little girls. Mom and Dad bought us dolls and books of fairy tales, and we reenacted The Exorcist with the dolls and made believe that Prince Charming was really a vampire who woke Snow White up to turn her undead. During the day, everything was fine. We were brave, but at night, we always asked Narcissa to stay upstairs with us. Dad didn't like Narcissa sleeping in our room. He called her the help. But it was inevitable. We told her that if she didn't come up, we'd go down to sleep with the help in her room. That seemed to terrify her. And so Narcissa, who must have been about 14 years old, tried to protest, saying that she didn't want to sleep with us, that we should be more afraid of the living than the dead. And we thought it was ridiculous because how could anyone be more afraid of Narcissa, for example, than of Regan, the girl from The Exorcist, or more afraid of Don Pepe, the gardener, than of the Salem vampires, or of Damien, the Antichrist, or more afraid of Dad than of the Wolfman. Absurd. Mom and Dad were never home. Dad worked and Mom played bridge with neighbors. That's why Mercedes and I could go rent horror movies at the video store every day after school. The boy who worked there never said a word to us. We knew that the cases said over 16 or 18, but the boy never said anything. His face was covered in zits and he was fat and he always had a fan pointing at his crotch. The only time he ever talked to us was when we rented The Shining. He looked at it, then looked at us and said, "There are some girls just like you in this. Both of them are dead. Their dad killed them." Mercedes grabbed my hand, and we stood there like that, holding hands in our matching uniforms, staring at him until he gave us the movie. Mercedes was a big scaredy cat, pale, sickly. Mom said that I must have eaten up everything that came down the umbilical cord because she was tiny when she was born, a little worm, and I, on the other hand, was born like a bull. That's the word everyone used, bull. And the bull had to take care of the worm. Who else would? Sometimes I wish I could be the worm, but that was impossible. I was the bull, and Mercedes, the worm. I'm sure Mercedes would have liked to be the bull sometimes, not always tagging along in my shadow, waiting for me to say something so that she could simply agree, "Me too." Never me, always me too. Mercedes never wanted to watch horror movies, but I made her because a girl from school said I wasn't brave enough to watch all the movies. She'd been with her big brother since I didn't have a big brother, only Mercedes, the infamous scary cat, and I couldn't stand it. So that afternoon, I dragged Mercedes to the video store and we rented all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And that night and every night after, we had to tell Narcissa to come upstairs to sleep with us because if Freddy gets in our dreams, in your dreams, he kills you in your dreams and no one knows what happened to you because it just looks like you had a heart attack or choked to death on your own drool. Something normal. And so no one ever finds out that you were actually killed by a monster with knives for fingers. Having siblings can be a blessing. Having siblings can be a curse. We learned this from the movies. And we learned that one sibling always saves the other. Mercedes started having nightmares. Narcissa and I did everything we could to keep her quiet so Mom and Dad wouldn't find out. They would punish me. Horror movies, so obviously the bull's fault. Poor little worm, poor little Mercedes. To have such a beast of a sister, a girl, so unlike a girl, so wild, what a cross to bear. Why aren't you more like little Mercedes, so sweet, so quiet, so gentle? Mercedes' nightmares were worse than any of the movies we watched. They were about school, the nuns possessed by the devil, dancing naked, touching themselves down there, appearing in the mirror while she was brushing her teeth or taking a shower. The nuns, like Freddie, taking over her dreams. And we'd never even rented a movie like that. "What else happened, Mercedes?" I asked, but she didn't say anything. She just screamed. Mercedes' screams penetrated my skull. They sounded like howls, gaseous bites, animal things. Her eyes were open, but she was still somewhere else. And Narcissa and I hugged her so she would come back, but sometimes coming back took her a long time. And I thought, once again, that I was stealing something from her, just like when we were in Mom's belly. Mercedes started to get really skinny. We were identical, but less and less so, because I was becoming more and more like a bull, and she was becoming more and more like a worm. Sunken eyes, hunched, bony. I never had much love for the sisters at school, nor they for me. In other words, we hated each other. They had a radar for unruly souls, that's the term they used. But I didn't mind. I liked the sound of it. I hated their hypocrisy. They were bad people dressed up as good ones. They made me erase all the school's blackboards, clean the chapel, help Mother Superior distribute alms, which was just handing out what other people, our parents, had given to the poor, the middle women, keeping a bunch for herself, eating expensive fish, and sleeping on a feather mattress. It was punishment after punishment for me because I asked why they gave out rice to the poor while they ate sea bass, and I told them the Lord wouldn't have liked that because He made the fish for everyone. Mercedes squeezed my arm and cried. She knelt down and prayed for me with her eyes closed tight. She looked like a little angel. While she recited the Hail Mary, I wanted to make everything else stop dead because I felt like my sister's prayer was the only thing worth anything in this fucked up world. The nuns told my parents that my sister would be perfect for their order, and I imagined her life spent locked away in that prison of horrible clothes and giant crucifixes like shackles. I couldn't bear it. That summer we got our periods. First Mercedes, then me. Narcissa was the one who taught us how to use pads because Mom wasn't there, and she laughed when we started waddling around like ducks. She also told us that our blood meant that, with the help of a man, we could now make babies. That was ridiculous. Yesterday we couldn't even imagine doing an insane thing like creating a child, and today we could. That's a lie, we told her, and she grabbed us both by the arms. Narcissa's hands were very strong, big, masculine. Her fingernails, long and pointy, could open sodas without a bottle opener. Narcissa was small and just 2 years older than us, but she seemed to have lived 400 more lives. Our arms burned as she repeated that now we had to beware of the living more than the dead, that now we really had to be more afraid of the living than of the dead. "You are women now," she said. "Life isn't a game anymore." Mercedes started to cry. She didn't want to be a woman. I didn't either. But I'd rather be a woman than a bull. One night, Mercedes had another one of her nightmares. There weren't nuns anymore, but men. Faceless men who played with her menstrual blood and rubbed it all over their bodies, and then from everywhere monstrous babies appeared, like little rats, to gnaw her to death. I couldn't calm her down. We went to look for Narcissa, but her door was locked from the inside. We heard noises. Then silence, then noises again. We sat in the kitchen in the dark, waiting for her. When the door finally opened, we threw ourselves at her. We needed her arms so badly, her hands that always smelled like onion and cilantro, her healing words saying we should be more afraid of the living than the dead. A few inches away, we realized it wasn't her. We stopped, terrified, mute, frozen. It wasn't Narcissa who had come through the door. Our hearts ticked like bombs. There was something both foreign and familiar in that silhouette, filling us with disgust and horror. I was late to react. I didn't have the chance to cover Mercedes' mouth. she screamed. Dad slapped each of us across the face and then walked calmly up the stairs. Neither Narcissa nor her things were in the house the next morning. One more story. Griselda. I should do a trigger warning. This is some disturbing stuff in all of these stories. Sexual violence and those types of things. So, Griselda by María Fernanda Ampuero from her collection Cockfight, out from Influx Press. Miss Griselda made amazing cakes. She had binders filled with photos of the most beautiful cakes in the whole world. It was always the cake, not the new dress. The cake, not the colorfully wrapped gifts. The cake, not the delicious food that was the highlight of every birthday party. Choosing it and imagining all the guests' jealous faces as they saw how awesome our birthday cake was. The thing was, Miss Griselda's cakes weren't round like everyone else's. They were shaped like Mickey Mouse, a dollhouse, a fire truck, Winnie the Pooh, the Ninja Turtles. Miss Griselda's cakes weren't white with colored sprinkles like the ones my mom made, or caramel or chocolate like the ones you saw at the other birthday parties. No way. If it was a taxi, the cake was a taxi cab yellow. If it was a police car, it had everything, including the red lights of the siren. If it was a football, black and white. If it was Cinderella, it had everything down to her blonde hair and glass slippers, even the brown mice. Miss Griselda made unforgettable cakes. She made my brother's first communion cake in the shape of an open Bible, and on the pages made of sugar she wrote in little gold letters, "There's nothing more perfect than love. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." People couldn't stop asking my mom where she'd gotten such an amazing cake, and they took pictures of it instead of my brother. Or rather, they took pictures of him, but always with the cake. Mom told Miss Griselda. She blushed. She looked happy. When it was almost our birthdays, all the kids in the neighborhood would go over to Miss Griselda's after harassing our mother for days, our stomachs churning with excitement. Finally, the moment would come when she would give us her stack of binders and tell us ceremoniously, "Pick whichever one you want. Take your time." Her eyes shone as she waited for us to point to the chosen one. "This one!" We began to turn the pages. The decision, that terrible moment, and our brothers and sisters always interfering. "Mommy, I want this one for my next birthday. Mommy, I want her to make me a cake too." We had big fights. Once, we argued so much that Mom got 2 cakes for my party. One that looked like R2-D2, and another that looked like strawberry shortcake. While we decided, my mom would ask after Miss Griselda's health, about her daughter Griseldita, about her plants, but never about her husband. People said that her husband had gone off with another woman, or that one day he went to work and never came home, or that he was in prison, or that he beat her so badly she ended up in bed for days and she threatened to call the police, or that he had kicked her and her daughter out of the house and they had to come here. I knew the house well because my friend Wendy Martillo had lived there before her parents got divorced. Even though it was the same house, Miss Griselda's place was very different from my friend Wendy Martillo's. Maybe it was all the very large and very dark furniture in the tiny living room, or maybe it was the thick curtains that were always shut tight. Miss Griselda's house smelled stale, old, dusty. But none of that mattered because all you had to do was open one of her binders, and it was all bright colors and Disney characters, Barbies, Spider-Man, soccer fields with green sugar grass, confectionery goalposts and cookie crumb players, hearts, teddy bears, baby booties, treasure chests filled with chocolate coins, anything we could ever wish for on a cake. Miss Griselda didn't make a living doing this. Actually, she didn't charge much at all because everyone in the neighborhood was broke. Her daughter, Griseldita, was the one who supported them. It seemed like she was doing pretty well. She got in 2 new cars and always wore new clothes. She bought entire suitcases of items from Miss Martha across the street, who brought things from Panama, and it was this woman who spread the rumor that Griseldita was in with a wayward crowd. That's how she said it. A wayward crowd. Griseldita was blonde, very white, and she always wore heels that made her look really tall. She came home at 4 in the morning a lot, making a ton of noise, screeching her brakes, jangling her keys, and click-clacking her heels. What no other woman in the neighborhood would do, Griseldita did. One day, we went to pick out the cake for my 11th birthday, and as soon as we got inside, my mom, who was in front of me, sent me back outside. But I got a glimpse. Miss Griselda was lying on the floor, her robe askew, her panties showing, and she looked dead. I screamed. My mom was furious and she sent me home. Then a little later, I saw Miss Martha run across the street, then Miss Diana and Miss Alicita. Then the whole block was out on the street. They were shouting for Don Bach, the neighborhood watch, to come help. We peeked out the windows in spite of our mother's shouted threats. It seemed that someone had called Griseldita because she arrived shortly, more angry than afraid, and shooed away all the women who had surrounded her mother. She shrieked like a madwoman for all the nosy old ladies to get out, that there was nothing wrong, shitty old ladies, to mind your own business, you bunch of old whores. Don't you have your own houses, you bunch of old bats? Miss Martha stood on the pavement murmuring, "The nerve of that girl, her calling us whores, and while we're helping her mother." My mom was the first to come home because she didn't like all the ruckus. She said just that, "I don't like all the ruckus." She had blood on her hands, and we got scared and started to cry. "Miss Griselda fell down. Everything's fine. She's all right. She slipped because she just mopped the floor." Later, I heard her talking to the other women. Miss Griselda smelled of alcohol, Mom told them. She'd fallen down and busted open her forehead. She was covered in vomit, Mom whispered, and dirty. The other women said that Griseldita might have hit her, that she beats her senseless. They repeated, senseless. My mom didn't believe it. No way. How could a daughter do that to her mother? That's atrocious. No way, no way. The other women said it was true, and that both of them hit the bottle hard. They hit it hard. They repeated, they hit the bottle hard, they hit it hard. And that when she came home drunk, she beat her mother. Or when she found her mother drunk, she beat her. That when she was sober, she beat her mother. That it was an everyday thing. That year, on my 11th birthday, I didn't get my cake. Mom didn't want to order it from Miss Griselda after all that. So we had a sad sponge cake covered in white meringue, a go-go sweets for sprinkles, and a candle shaped like the number 11. Mom promised me that I would have the most spectacular cake in the world for next year, and I started picturing a super tall, super blonde Barbie with a crown and a pink princess dress with silver ruffles, all made from layers of cake with caramel in the middle. Miss Griselda would make me the most beautiful Barbie cake in the world. I could already see it, so perfect, in the center of the table. My classmates would die of envy. Bam, bam, bam. One after another, like cockroaches sprayed with Baygon. That Christmas was brutally hot, and half the neighborhood was already out on the street when we heard the gunshot. Boom! Like a thunderclap. Bats took off with terrifying squeals. Dogs started barking. Everyone crowded in front of Miss Griselda's house, but no one dared to go inside. Some police officers brought her out wrapped in a white sheet. It was getting soaked with more and more blood, the stain only growing. "What did Doña Griselda do?" my mom cried. "Or what if it was her daughter?" Miss Martha gasped. And they covered our eyes and sent us home, but none of us went. We just stood a little further away. The lights from the police car went round and round. Everything was red. In the distance, Christmas firecrackers were going off, and the stain kept growing, and a hand escaped from under the sheet. Just one hand, like she was saying, "Ciao, you guys. I have to stay here." A few days later, a truck came to take away all of Miss Griselda's furniture and a bunch of boxes of her stuff. The cake binders, too, I guess. Her daughter left the neighborhood the same day. We never saw her again. I had shitty round cakes for my birthday the next few years, but honestly, I didn't give a damn about cakes anymore. And that was the story Griselda from the anthology Cockfight, out from Influx Press, written by María Fernanda Ampuero. Let's do one more. This one's called Blinds. What you have to do is close the windows and lower the blinds in the daytime, then open everything up at night. That's what we've done day after day, summer after summer, for as long as this house, which my great-grandparents built, has had windows. The person in the family in charge of raising and lowering the blinds, responsible for the temperature inside the house, you could say, has always been a child on their way out of being a child. Who was the first? Some uncle or aunt who we only heard about in reference to one of my cousin's physical traits. Relatives who one day went off to war or to the United States, emigrated, never returned, or who died in childhood and left behind Julio's nose, Maria Teresa's bow legs, my stutter, or nothing. Relatives who passed through this family like the maids walked through this house when my grandfather was still alive, silent, hunched, never interrupting. Those only mentioned to recall how many children my great-grandmother, Aunt Elsa, great-aunt Toya, and Grandma had, and how many had died. Back then, I suppose, kids just died, like 3 of Leica's 7 puppies, which were thrown in the rubbish. "Mom, if I died, what would you do?" "I died too, Felipe. I died too. You're the only man in my life, the only one who will never leave me." 2 summers ago, the person in charge of the house's temperature was my cousin Julio, who was 14, but Mom says that my aunt and uncle bought an apartment at the beach, and that's why they stopped coming. Every time we see each other in the city, less and less now, they promise us that they'll come this summer for sure. But 200,000 days of summer in this town have passed, and they've never come. This house was a different house when my aunt and uncle used to come with Julio and Maria Teresa. They filled it up and kept the pool clean and brought Leica. We played in town without anyone watching us. We stayed up late, slept on blankets on the patio under the stars, which we don't have in the city, and talked about things we don't talk about in the city. Nothing that is here is there, not even us. In this house, our house, it was like we were different from the people we were in our apartments. There, we were smaller, clumsier, uglier, stinkier. That is to say, there in the city, we were losers. At school, I didn't have a single friend, but during the summer, I was part of a group of just 3, true, but there was a girl. The funniest girl in the world, my cousin Maria Teresa, and the coolest guy in the world, my cousin Julio, and, well, me. In this house, in the armpit of that town, in the armpit of the world, life was pretty good. The 3 of us grew up there. Here, Julio broke my arm while pretending to be Bruce Lee. Here, we cut the hair off Maria Teresa's dolls, and she didn't talk to us for the rest of the summer. Here, we found out that Dad wouldn't be coming back from his holiday abroad, that his holiday abroad was named Sophia, and that Sophia was going to have a baby, my future brother or sister. Here, Maria Teresa got her first period, and my uncle cried, and my aunt called him a fag. Here, we drank and we smoked. Here, Julio told me for the first time about jacking off and showed me a porn magazine, and I stared at all the pussies in it till I had them memorized. Here, Maria Teresa's body changed. She stretched out, but we never stopped calling her Maria Obisa, and she became a woman with everything women have, plus the black hair and cheek dimples that had been Maria Teresa's her whole life. Here, Julio became a hateful, acne-ridden creature who never stopped popping his zits and telling everyone to fuck off. Here, I was scared to death when I saw Julio's huge body and closed fist coming at my face because I called him a fag. Here, my cousin Julio broke my nose. Here, one stormy summer night in the pool, Maria Teresa kissed me on the mouth and then told Julio, and at first he called us pigs, disgusting, but then he also wanted to. The three of us kissed, Maria Teresa in the middle, kissing me, kissing him. It felt so wildly good and so wildly bad all at once, and it jumbled up our hearts so much that we all ended up crying. Julio cried, Maria Teresa cried, I cried. It felt like we'd spent our whole lives in that pool, alone, without any adult ever holding up a towel and telling us to get out. We kissed each other's wet, wrinkled mouths again, and we swore that we'd love each other forever, that when we grew up, we'd get married, the three of us, that there would never be anyone but us, that we'd be better parents to our children, that we'd never leave them like my dad did, that we'd never put work above everything like my uncle did, that we'd never be as stupid as my aunt, that we'd never be as sad as my mom. On the wall of the tool shed, the headquarters of our club, we drew a heart with our initials inside, and another until there were many hearts and many initials on the old walls of the shed. Then we cut our thumbs with my uncle's knife and joined them together. Then we kissed. It was obvious. We'd be better parents than our parents because we actually loved one another. Here, one of my uncle's employees who had come out into the yard to tell us that we were going to catch a cold saw us kissing and touching each other. But now they don't come here anymore. The pool is full of leaves and little insect corpses, which surround me as I float, still absorbed. Sometimes I think that the sun doesn't even touch me. That this fucking town's violent sun, which makes everyone else so tan and happy, avoids me entirely. I feel just as pale and out of place as I do in the city. I hit a ball against the wall again and again, possessed, and imagine the growl of my uncle's truck engine, Laika's barks, Maria Teresa's high-pitched laugh, Julio juggling a football, my mom telling her brother how happy she is to see him and seeing her happy, really happy after so many months of living with something else that is not happiness. To hear her sing love songs, to watch her go into the kitchen to make lemonade, serve ice cream in those tall glasses that can fit 2 scoops, whipped cream, and a wafer. Your uncle first, your uncle, you, go away, don't touch it, slapping my hand away. None of that happens anymore. I don't know the names of the dogs barking in the distance, and the tall glasses collect dust on the shelf. I stay in the pool, a translucent bug floating among the other dark bugs. Mosquitoes buzz by my eyelashes. I don't move. I hardly breathe. I have gone so long without moving that I think the best thing that could happen to me now would be to die, to drown, so that Maria Teresa and Julio, full of sunshine and shellfish and friends and whatever else they have there at that fucking beach, will have to scream and sob over me. Me, their love, their husband, who they left abandoned in this cursed house in the country with 2 crazy, lonely, evil women for the only happy months of the fucking year. That's just not right, for fuck's sake. They will sob and sob until the last summer of their lives, when, old and stooped, punished by heartbreak and loneliness and hideousness and poverty and dementia, their senile minds will still remember their beloved Felipe, who drowned because of them, because they did nothing, because they didn't say, Mom and Dad, we want to go to the country to be with Felipe. There's nothing better than that. We choose Felipe over everything else. Fucking idiots. But I don't drown in the end. Mom calls me to dinner. I didn't feel like lowering the blinds today, and the heat is unbearable. The only one who can say anything about it is Mom, because Grandma, although she surely notices, can't complain. For the past few years, her face has been frozen in the same look of surprise, one shoulder slumped, one hand, the right one folded over her thigh, and the other covering it up in shame. Sitting there in her wheelchair, Grandma looks so small, so harmless. But she used to be a mean old bitch who would smack you so hard with that same hand, the right one, so hard that your face would be red for hours. Julio once told us that she called him a son of a bitch, said, "I know you're not my son's child," and she beat him. She once called Maria Teresa a slut just for wearing a miniskirt. Little slut, little slut, little slut, worthless sluts. You and your mother both. To me, on the other hand, and I don't know if it was because she liked me or pitied me, she just said, "Sad. You're a sad boy." After the blood clot, she stopped talking, thank God. At first, she would write down what she wanted on pieces of paper, but the notes were so insulting that Mom had to read her messages, omitting every other word. The old lady wanted to retain her freedom of expression so badly that her knuckles would go white against the arms of her wheelchair, and she looked like she was about to scream, her eyes about to pop out of their sockets like her rage could trigger an earthquake. Then she'd soil herself. Mom took the notebook away from her. She left her mute. At dinner, Mom says that she's not going to eat, that she's going to take a shower, that the heat is too unbearable. She also says that there's tuna salad and bread in the refrigerator. I eat guiltily. The heat is my fault. Her lack of appetite is my fault. And eating this bad dinner alone is my punishment because of the blinds. But I don't want to be the one in charge of the blinds. The ones who raise and lower the blinds in this house always leave, die, are forgotten. No, I don't want to. I miss my cousins. I want to be the boy I was when they were here. I begin to cry. This summer, and very possibly every summer for the rest of my life, is going to be shit. I start to feel scared of the house. I think of all the men who are no longer here. Grandpa, Dad, Uncle, Julio. I don't want to be here either. I don't like being a man. Can't I be something else? There's no other place I want to go unless the past is a place, but I don't want to be here. I go upstairs with a bowl of salad for Mom. She's lying under the fan, face up, still soaking wet from the shower, still naked. Mom's body, white as cream like mine, lit by the dim light coming in from the window, looks like the body of a drowned woman. Like someone who's been pulled from a pool too late and laid out, legs splayed on the bed. With Mom dead, I could go. Yes, I'd throw some things in a backpack and I'd go off to find Maria Teresa and Julio. Mom dead, drowned. I didn't lower the blinds. Mom? I start crying again. I lie down next to her. She opens her eyes, tells me everything is fine. My baby boy, my sweet boy, come here, give me a kiss. I move closer, and she caresses my face, tells me I look like Dad, like that summer with Maria Teresa and Julio. Our lips touch. You came from here, she says, and puts my hand on her damp pussy. And you drank from here, she says, and moves my hands to her sagging breasts. I squeeze them and I kiss them and I suck them, thinking the whole time about my cousins and the love we said we'd always have for each other. I hear her voice, a voice that comes from deep underwater. Do you want to marry me, son? I say yes. Everyone's abandoned me, so I say yes. When I turn towards the door, I think I see Grandma there in her wheelchair, a repulsive smile on her face. Mom whispers, you came from here, my son. Enter here. Come. And do we have time for one more? Let's see here. I bookmarked one more. We're reading from Cockfight, short story collection out from Influx Press. Author is María Fernanda Ampuero. And she's actually quite prolific, but to my knowledge, this is the only collection that is available in English. Since this is very dense stuff, we're going to do one more and call it a night. I'm just checking which one. How about Christ? It all began when my baby brother's fever started getting worse. I'd missed school for so many days, it felt like I'd never even gone. That since I was born, the only thing I'd ever done was take care of my baby brother. I stayed home while Mom went to work, and I gave him a spoonful of the pink medicine every hour and the clear medicine every hour, every 4. She had given me a clock with big numbers for my birthday. The baby was light. He barely weighed a thing. It was like carrying wrinkled tissue paper in my arms. He didn't giggle. He rarely opened his eyes. One night, one of my mom's friends punched a hole through the bathroom door, sick of hearing him cry. "Shut it up," he said to my mom. "Make that fucking creature shut up. If you weren't such a whore, you wouldn't have made such a monster. You should put it out of its misery." He cursed repeatedly and continued punching the door with his fist. It was better he hit the bathroom door and not my baby brother, and not her. But he hit her some too. We never saw that friend again, and it got harder to buy the pink medicine and the clear medicine, but she made it stretch with a little bit of boiled water. She clenched her fists while waiting to take my baby brother's temperature. Her fingers would be white after, and she made a little noise after shaking the thermometer in the air and looking at it under the lamp. A little noise with her tongue and teeth. When she didn't make the noise, it meant the baby was having a better day. Some weekends, she sent me to my grandparents' house. My grandpa Fernando would always take me to the cemetery to visit his dead mother Rosita first. Then we would go to La Palma to drink Coca-Cola with vanilla ice cream. A little girl with her grandpa, in a dress, with no brothers or sisters. An only child. Spoiled. It always flew by, and it was Monday before I knew it. One afternoon, while I was watching Woody Woodpecker, my baby brother started to cry. I didn't go to him. It was time for the pink medicine, but I didn't go. I wanted to watch Woody Woodpecker, the whole episode. For once in my life, a whole episode without having to look at the clock with the big numbers, without having to measure out the medicine with that big white plastic spoon, without having to fight to get him to swallow it. My clothes all sticky and smelly with the stuff, like always. I wanted to smell like a girl who watched Woody Woodpecker and did nothing else. I laughed, even at the parts that weren't funny, loud, very loud, like Woody, to block out my brother's cries. After a while, the show ended and the Flintstones started. I watched that whole episode too. When I went to check on him, the baby had stopped shrieking. I touched him. It was like putting my hand over a bright candle. I called the neighbor, and the neighbor called my mom. "Did you give him the pink medicine?" I nodded. The doctor sent us some green medicine and suppositories. My mom showed me how to give him the suppositories. I didn't want to. My baby brother screamed like this little brown dog that was hit by a taxi once in front of our house and then left to die with his guts on the pavement, but still alive. He screamed exactly like that. Pink, clear, green, suppository. The next day, we left my brother with my grandparents and went to Cristo del Consuelo Church. It was in the black neighborhood, the forbidden neighborhood. My mom and I were like 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream floating in Coca-Cola. A large black woman told my mom to have faith. Have faith, Donita. Christ works miracles. Then she asked for money, spare change. Why didn't she ask her Christ? If he could work miracles, he must be rolling in spare change, not like us, who sometimes had to walk places because we didn't have enough to cover the bus fare. The black lady sold my mom a little baby doll to hang from Christ's brown robe. When we got inside the church, there were tons of those little dolls everywhere, and little hearts and little legs and little arms and little heads, and other body parts I didn't recognize, and photos and cards and bills and drawings. One of the cards read, "Help, Lord, I'm only 9 years old and I have cancer." Mom, I asked, how is Christ going to know which of all these babies is my baby brother? Because he's very smart. It smells strange in there. Like old people, dust. Like when I don't wash my hair for days. Like heat. Like when the power goes out. Before we left, my mom took out an empty bottle of Los Andes ketchup and filled it with water from a tap. Good water, she said. Water from this sweet Christ, holy water. She gave me a sip, but it didn't taste holy. It tasted like ketchup and a little rusty. And I thought to myself that water with ketchup, like what we put on our rice at the end of the month when the bottle was running out, could not possibly work miracles. Holy water should taste like caramel, like a double hamburger. It should not taste like poor people. With that stupid taste in my mouth, I wanted to scream at the whole world that they were wrong, that the only miracle here was this woman getting change for selling little body parts and whole little bodies to stick on the skirt of a Christ who tasted like watery ketchup. My little brother stayed there, or rather a little doll, just as deformed as he was, surrounded by hundreds of other equally creepy little dolls, and heads and arms and legs and hearts like there had been some kind of explosion. He has to stay here, my mom said, suddenly furious. And I cried the whole way home because I realized that she didn't know what she was doing either. At home, my mom gave my baby brother a little bit of the water and poured some on his head. He opened his eyes and showed us his mouth, toothless. Finally, he smiled at us. The following week, just like that, with that smile, we put him inside a tiny white box that the neighbor took up a collection to pay for. I'm back at school now. Back in 4th grade again, where I'm huge and I don't have any friends. When they ask me if I have brothers or sisters, I think about that little baby hanging from the Cristo del Consuelo's robes, and I say no. They wouldn't understand. We're all thrown into it, one way or the other. We all try to steer it as straight as we can. Sometimes we collide with each other. Who is to blame and who's gonna fix the boat? Life, oh life, there's nothing to fear from your life. Let me know if I can be of any help.
to keep our heads above water. But now I'm not afraid anymore.